Hello and welcome to another Capital Ideas. I'm Sandy Behan and our guest this week is Ron Wood, City Manager for Norman. Welcome.
Good morning. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Same to you. It's been, what, a year since you were last with us, so we got a lot to talk about. I thought I might start with something that I'm particularly intrigued by because it's been about 2 years since you first talked about it and first tried to get people to sign up for this, and that's your volunteer program. And since then there's been some really nice articles in the transcript, and I thought we might talk about what's going on with that program.
Sure, I'd be glad to. That has really been a success for us. We've actually had the program now for about 4 years, and it started off with at a high level, high peak, and we just had a lot of volunteers, and then it began to drop off a little bit. And there's been some more publicity and word of mouth about it, and people are now calling us wanting to volunteer. It's sort of a unique program in terms of how we've set it up. I think a good volunteer program requires commitment from the agency plus the volunteer. And so what we've done, we treat it like a job. It's just a non-paying job. We have job descriptions that are put together, and also a contract with the volunteers indicating what they're able to do. We don't require any specific number of hours. They tell us what is available, and then we find a way to fit that into what our program is. And we have about, I would guess, maybe 30 or so people volunteering in our general program, and then we have a volunteer program in police also, and they have about the same number over there, so we've got a pretty good mix of people. I visited with a young man yesterday, as a matter of fact. I was just outside my office, outdoors, and he was disabled, and he was coming down the sidewalk with a couple of friends of his, and he was really excited. He had just been interviewed as a volunteer in the police department. And he was so excited about that. He starts Monday, and he will be looking at receipts from pawn shops, comparing those to stolen merchandise that we have. And that's an important job for us. There's a lot of people that lose that merchandise, and because we don't have the staff to continually look at that, we never do find it. And so now we've got this young man that's going to be doing that for us, and hopefully he will find some people's missing jewelry and guns and first one thing and another. And he was just so excited about it.
Yeah, I know in the city part of it, that people like provide information, take phone calls. What else?
We have volunteers that just do just about everything. There's some data entry and some things of that. A lot of research. We have volunteers doing research on particular problems. Some people, we have one gentleman that inspects all of our roads looking for potholes. He drives the city about once every 2 weeks and identifies all the potholes and turns those into us, and then we go back and begin to repair those. And I visited with him a couple of weeks ago, I guess, and he was talking about how satisfying that is, because when he goes back on the next tour, he sees the results of his work. You know, that problem is fixed, and he goes find some more. And that's been a great help to us also. So they do just about everything, from computer work to doing the pothole work, or doing, you know, pawn shop receipts, anything that we can find that they feel like is interesting to them. Okay.
Now you mentioned, of course, this one young man who was disabled, and some of the people that I've seen interviews on in the newspaper were retired. Is there a broad range of volunteers, or does it tend to fit into the general category of people who are retired? Or
I think that we have a fairly broad range of people. We have some young people that come in and do some work for us. There are a few middle-aged people that have time to come in and do significant work for us. We also have you know, retired people come in. As a matter of fact, I had a retired executive from a private corporation that had a tremendous amount of experience in systems analysis, and we wanted to look at how the process that we use to accomplish a number of functions at City Hall, and wanted to improve those processes. And he got involved in that and did a systems analysis of that, and gave us some recommendations of how we could improve that. we would have never had the time to do that on our own. So if you have special skills and abilities, we can generally find a place to use those.
Okay, very good. There's, over the past year, and then it may in fact be longer than that, but specifically during the past year, there's been a lot of programs emerged like Link Norman and 2020 that are trying to project into the future and make some decisions about where Norman is going and what's going to happen. How do you delineate those kinds of programs, and what is their purpose?
They each have a special purpose. For instance, Norman 2020 is a land use plan. And we know, based upon past trends, that population is going to increase in Norman. Where are those people going to live? Where are they going to work? How are we going to use the land? What is the most efficient way to use that land? Norman 2020 created a planned forum group that included citizens within our community, along with our consultants and some staff, to begin to look at what the future of Norman was in terms of our land use. And they have just about finished that process now, and I think they're ready to publish their report. It'll go to council, there'll be public hearings on that, and then discussion on it. Some significant things that are coming out of that, for instance, and you may have read something about this in the papers, is in the rural areas, and especially on the far eastern side of our community. That is an environmentally sensitive area because of watersheds that are there, the geologic formations underneath the ground, our water aquifers are there, the Garber Wellington, and it's not really suitable to high density development. So there's some proposals there to limit the density of construction per acre. I think we're currently looking at about 10 units per site, and that's controversial, and so there'll be some discussion on that. But anyway, that's the Norman 2020 is a land use plan. Link Norman is a different type of envisioning, and I was asked not long ago about the term envisioning, where that comes from, and I didn't really know. I looked that up in the dictionary, and that is to picture oneself in the future. And so that's what we're asking people to do, is to picture yourself 20 or 25 years from now in this community. What would you like to see? There are about 125 stakeholders. These people are represent as close as we can the demographics of Norman. They are trying to look to the future to see where we want to be. There's a process where you evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of Norman today, and then to develop initiatives that we think that we can deal with, you know, a number that's workable, and develop programs then to correct those weaknesses and make our community what it want to be. We're just now in the stage of beginning to develop those initiatives now, and that's an exciting program. I don't know what's going to come out of that, but general kinds of discussions have been about education. They've been about economic development. We've talked a great deal about crime, juvenile crime. We've talked about families and how they work and how they impact our society. And it's going to be interesting to see how we begin to deal with some of those problems in the future.
Okay. It would seem, if you read the paper, and based on what's happening with the state, that this has been a fairly financially successful year for the city of Norman. That income is up, tax revenues are up, things are fairly healthy, the job situation is pretty good. By the same token, the people in Washington, D.C. are beginning to cut back very drastically on A, the amount of money that's going to be available, and B, the ways in which that money will be made available to cities to continue to do things like fix the streets and fix their sewers and dream these dreams, if you will. How does that impact you at this point in time?
You know, no one is really sure. That whole process of devolution, we know, will place more responsibility at the state, the county, and the city government level. The state will be the focus. The first step is to move programs or the responsibility for dealing with certain issues to the state level. Federal government won't deal with those anymore. Now the states will have a choice. Do we even want to deal with them? If we do, how do we want to do that? Do we want to make create state programs and raise the revenues within our state to do it? Or do we want to pass some of those programs and make them the responsibilities of counties and cities? And if we do, then we'll be faced with how are we going to deal with those programs. I was at a conference recently where the mayor of San Antonio spoke about that. And local government, city government, is most directly involved with the citizens of this country. We will be responsible for having to deal with all of the issues that are passed on or just not dealt with by other groups. For instance, homeless. If the federal government, state government decides that they're not going to do anything about it, the homeless will be living in our community. How are we going to deal with that? Now, we don't have those answers. We don't know. But I think that there will be quite a bit of national study done on that by various groups and associations, and we certainly have to start thinking about it in our own community.
Okay, we have places like East Norman, or East Main Place, excuse me. You have all the different service agencies, JSI, Women's Resource Center, Transition House, all the different United Way groups that provide community services. And those groups are talking about moving into one common building. Now, is the city involved in the planning for that, or is that a whole separate thing?
Well, we have Linda Price with our community development department is certainly involved in that. She deals with a lot of the CDBG projects that deal with housing, and she works closely with the Housing Authority and so forth. And so, yes, she's involved with that and knows what's going on. I think that probably the future will hold a great deal of public-private partnerships to solve some of the problems. I don't think that if we try to say government is going to take care of all these problems, that they're going to get taken care of well. But our nonprofits, the United Way agencies and groups like that can work with us, and they're already a great help in Norman. And I think that that'll probably be a future, that will be our future in trying to deal with some of the problems. Norman
has approximately 100,000 people, right? Are we a typical city for that size, or are we unique in some ways?
Well, we're unique along with a number of other communities that have a major university. That's what makes Norman unique. It's just a special place when you're able to live in a community with a major university. It just brings so many things to the community that enlivens our community, creates debate, creates a lot of diversity, a lot of different opinions about what our future is and how we should work through it. So it's unique in that way. There are some things that are not too unique. We live in a large metropolitan area, and there are a lot of cities like that. In some of those instances, we have the situation of decaying downtowns and flight to the suburbs and things of that nature. That creates significant issues for us in terms of how we're going to deal with that. But Norman, I've had the privilege of living in what have been considered as pretty nice places. Austin, Texas was one. On the Front Range, Fort Collins, Colorado was another. I've been associated with Boulder in close to Boulder in a number of ways. Norman ranks right up there with them, I think. Austin is a much larger city than we are. Boulder and Fort Collins are about the same. And I think Norman has a reputation throughout the country, especially in the professional circles of city management and so forth, of being a great place to live and work.
Okay, very good. We'll be back in just a moment with two students from Central Mid High School. Our student guests this week are William Roberts and Brooke Baxter. And I think, Brooke, you get the honor of asking Mr. Wood the first question.
For the student body viewing, can you explain exactly what you do?
Yes, in a council manager form of government, the city council does not deal with the daily administration. That's the city manager's role. City council is a policy-making body, and the city manager is the administrative arm of city government. I'm responsible for making sure that the policies and programs that are defined at our council are carried out efficiently and effectively.
How long exactly have you been in office, and how long do you plan on staying?
I've been here 7 years, and I guess I will be here until a better opportunity comes along or somebody gets tired of me.
7 years is a pretty standard life cycle for a city manager, isn't it?
Well, actually, the average life cycle of a city manager is about 2.5 years in one place,
Okay.
and then they move along. You have different, you have changing councils with different political ideas and policy viewpoints, and normally with changing councils, you'll see city managers that may be moving up to other positions.
Okay.
What goals, as we go into 1997, do you have set as your position as city manager?
I think there are 2 or 3 sort of major community goals. Obviously, we have the sub-goals of our construction projects and completing those and so forth. But in terms of community goals, I think it will be adoption of our land use plan that's envisioning into the future of what Norman is going to be like and how we're going to use our land. Working to completion with a group of people that are involved in Link Norman, who are also involved with looking at the future of our community in terms of education and crime and families and things of that nature, and developing initiatives to improve our future. Third item is an economic development coalition between the university, the chamber, and the city. We have just established that, and the board is now beginning to work. And in this coming year, we want to solidify that and hire staff and begin to implement an economic development plan.
Have cities services been able to keep up with the expansion of businesses, and if so, do we have enough manpower and fire policemen to?
Well, as the community grows, it grows incrementally. You don't see a jump from 25,000 to 50,000 or 50 to 75 in 1 year. We have a budget process that allows us to evaluate those sorts of situations each year. We are just now beginning to enter into that budget process. Our first step is to visit with our city council, and they give us issues that they think are important to look at that. We create issue teams that go back and define that issue more specifically and look for alternative ways to deal with that. I don't think that we look at our organization in terms of necessarily the people power that we have. We look at it in terms of what are the issues and how do we solve that issue. The alternatives may include adding staff to deal with an issue. It could be creating public-private partnerships to deal with an issue. It may be to find other agencies that could more adequately deal with the issue. So we look at it on an issue basis as opposed as a staffing level kind of an issue.
Our sister city in France that came up last year, what do you think about that?
I think that at times that can be a little bit controversial because if you're sitting at home and reading your daily newspaper and you see that we have a sister city in France, and you begin, why in the world would the city of Norman be interested in having a sister city in France or China or Japan or Mexico or any of those places? Our role in a global economy is changing, and it's changing quick. We have a number of businesses in Norman that operate out of an office that do business internationally. We have a need to understand other cultures, other countries, how they operate. I think that does a lot for us in terms of being able to deal in an economic or a business sense with them. It also has the impact, I believe, of creating a situation where we can solve our problems. If the only people that know each other are the diplomats and the people in the federal government, our diplomats knowing their diplomats, then our country really doesn't know how to respond to any suggestions they make. But if our people mix and we talk and we understand each other, then we have a better understanding. And I think that promotes a more harmonious world, as a matter of fact.
How exactly did we get into the Sister City program?
We have actually made several attempts at that over a period of time. It's a program that's sponsored by a national association of, I don't think it's called Sister Cities, but something like that. And we just got involved with that and began to talk about it and decided we'd give it a try.
We have one in France. We also have one in Japan, right?
That's right. And the one in Japan is brand new, and we have not actually had the confirmation of that yet, but we're working towards that.
Is there any plans for the empty lot line on Alameda?
Excuse
For
me?
the empty lot line on Alameda?
I don't know what that is.
There's been a empty lot that's been sitting over there for...
Oh, you're talking about the old Heisman
Yeah.
Square property. Yes, there is. Matter of fact, there's some permits been taken out for some construction along there. I don't think that has actually started yet, and that's some commercial activity going there. We think that would be an ideal site for a more substantial type of retail shopping sort of a situation, and we'd like to encourage that to occur.
Why hasn't it? Why do you keep building on the west side but not on the east side? What's the standard answer?
When the standard answer, well, the real answer to that is, number one, city government doesn't control that. We zone property, but zoning has a wide range of uses to it. Commercial can be a lot of different things. That's actually a private business decision. If you're in the retail business and you're looking for a place to build a new business, maybe you want to spend $2 or $3 million on a building and so forth, you want it to be successful, you're going to do a market study to determine how you are most likely to be successful. One of the things that you want to do is be probably in an area of high traffic. Where do you have high traffic? On I-35. You catch all kinds of people, not only in the community, but people going up and down the interstate. So that's one of the parameters. That is a preferred sort of location. We still believe, though, that from our standpoint, that there is a market on the east side, and I think that something's going to happen there before too long. We're just beginning to have more interest in that. More people are beginning to ask questions about it. That is, business people, commercial enterprises, and so forth. And I just kind of think that'll happen.
Okay. Any other questions?
We're out.
We're out. Okay, let's go back to what you were talking about just a moment ago in terms of partnerships and decision making. And you were visiting with me while we were waiting for the kids to come on about one issue that currently the city is trying to deal with and with the mid-highs and lunchtime. And you wanted to talk to the kids about it. So
Sure.
This is your chance to talk to the kids about it.
Great, be glad to. We were talking about juvenile crime
Right.
and what's happening in juvenile crime, and I think that juvenile crime is going up. One of the questions is it going up because we're redefining it? What is a crime compared to, say, 10 or 20 years ago? And I think that's probably true. One of the issues we have around the mid-highs has to do with before and after school and maybe at lunch hour, the students congregating across the street from the schools on private property. When they congregate there are residences, private residences along there, and sometimes they get up in the yards. Maybe they're smoking and they're throwing cigarette butts on the street. Maybe they have paper and stuff that they're throwing around. Plus, there's a crowd there. And if I'm in my house and there's a crowd of people out in front of my house talking and so forth, that's sort of disturbing. How do we deal with that? Do we pass a law and say, hey, you can't go over there and stand? That's illegal. Don't want you doing that. And if you do it, we fine you. We, make you pay a $25 fine or something like that. Or maybe there's another approach. Young people, young adults, want to be adults, and they emulate adults to some extent. If they're wanting to be adults, how can we sit down with young people in a meaningful way, not just for show, but in a meaningful way, and describe a problem, and not get defensive about it, but describe a problem and say, how can we resolve the problem? Do you think that would be effective? Do you think we could accomplish that?
If we treated us as adults, yeah, it would work great. But of course, everyone has different feelings. So some of the kids will be acting as adults, and others will be acting the same and won't really, I won't say care, but won't treat it as if it's a law, as if it is a law. So kind of depends on what exactly y'all do about it.
When do you become an adult? Brooke, maybe you can answer that for me.
Legally, I think it's when we turn 18.
When do you think you become an
When
adult?
do I think adulthood is more of a mature basis, kind of state of mind. I mean, once you've reached a certain age and you're considered responsible by the people around you, then I think you've kind of reached adulthood. But to some people, like adults that I know now, I'm not considered an adult till I'm 21 and can like go to bars and stuff. That's what they're adult manner. And then there are other people who will now consider the way a lot of the teenagers today act adult-like. And so it's really like a state of mind and maturity. So
If we have to regulate behavior of people, which we do, for instance, it's illegal to rob somebody, whether you're an adult or not, right? But there are some laws that have to legally define an adult in order to be able to deal with them in a particular manner. For instance, you hear a lot about maybe a teenager that is being tried as an adult. And so we begin to cross the line. Drinking age, I don't know, what is that now, 21? Is that right? You've got to be 21 before you can drink. We have to have some sort of line of demarcation there in order to set a standard. We obviously can't sit down with each young person and make some determination as to whether or not you have matured to the point where you're an adult, right? So that's a problem, and we have to deal with it. But I still think that maybe, from my own perspective, that if we had meaningful dialogue with an issue and we didn't become defensive about my right as an adult or a person, and we didn't become defensive about you're just a kid so you don't get to say, if we could get by those things and say here's a problem, how can we solve it, and get to the solution, I believe we'd be better off. I just don't know whether or not, if that's coming from an adult, a young person may look at that and say, yeah, well, that's his idea. He thinks he knows it all, so, hey, I'm not going to participate in this. I'm going to go and do what I want to do.
Were you involved in the listening conference last year? Okay. Well, how did you feel about that?
It was great. I did it 8th grade and 9th grade, so I'm going to do it again this year. But I really haven't picked a topic yet. But
you're familiar with the listening conference? Are you involved in that?
I have gone a couple of times.
Okay. And did you go last year when you were?
no.
Okay. It's a little hard to explain in a minute that we have left, but that certainly is an opportunity to get at some things like this and give kids a chance to offer their solutions and to feel like they're finally being heard. I think it's an interesting discussion. I think it's something the city ought to think about pursuing, because these kids, I know these kids and the ones that are on the cameras and some of the other ones have some very definite and very solid ideas about what needs to be happening. Maybe give you some good advice.
We'd like to look at that, and in conjunction with the school district. There's a lot of players in that scenario. But I really believe that sometimes that we look at a way to solve a problem simply creating a regulation or creating a law. And quite honestly, we can't enforce all the laws that we have now. It's just impossible to do. And so when you try to enforce, you're going to maybe catch 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1,000, and everybody else is going about their business, and one person it's just not a good preventative measure.
And reasonably, you've got to expect that people are going to respect the law, at least most of them. That reduces the problem somewhat.
Sure.
Thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
We're
Thank
out
you
of
for
time,
having me.
unfortunately. Okay. Have a good Christmas.
I will.
And we'll be back with another Capital Ideas next year.